I still remember the morning I found that yellowed newspaper clipping in my grandfather's tackle box. It was from a tournament in 1967, somewhere along the Louisiana coast. The headline read, "Local Method Disqualified After Record Haul." Underneath, a grainy photo showed three men holding stringers so heavy they needed both hands. The article didn't explain what they'd done, just said it gave them an unfair advantage. That phrase stuck with me. Unfair advantage. Not cheating, not illegal. Just too effective. And that's exactly what we're testing today. A shore fishing technique from the 1960s that worked so well, tournament organizers started writing rules specifically to ban it. If you're interested in seeing how these old American methods really perform against modern setups, consider subscribing. That's exactly what this channel is about. I'm standing on a public access point along the outer banks of North Carolina. Water temperature is 61 degrees. Light chop coming in from the southeast. It's early April, and the speckled trout are moving through the sounds on their way to spawn. Perfect conditions to run this comparison. I've got two setups ready. One is what you'd see most people using today. 7-foot medium-action rod, braided line, artificial paddle tail on a 1/4-ounce jig head. Standard modern shore approach. The other setup looks almost identical. Same rod length, same weight. But the technique attached to it hasn't been legal in organized competitions for over 50 years. The method came from a man named Curtis Ray Holloman, born 1923, lived his entire life in Manteo, North Carolina. Curtis wasn't a guide, wasn't written up in magazines. He worked on shrimp boats most of his life and fished the sounds every evening after the docks closed. By the time he was in his 40s, other fishermen started noticing something strange. Curtis would fish the same public piers as everyone else, same time of day, same weather. But his count was different. Not by 1 or 2 fish, by multiples. Some evenings he'd take home limits while others went home empty. People assumed he had secret spots, better timing, maybe just luck. Then someone finally asked him directly, and Curtis, being the kind of man he was, didn't keep it to himself. What he showed them wasn't complicated. It didn't require special tools or expensive materials. It was a preparation method, something you did before you ever reached the water. And it involved one household item that most people already had in their kitchens. Curtis would take small cubes of fresh mullet or menhaden, the kind of bait fish everyone was already using, and he'd soak them overnight in a solution of plain table salt and cold tap water. Not brine, not a marinade, just a specific ratio that changed the tissue structure of the bait itself. The next day, he'd pull those cubes out, pat them dry, and keep them in a cooler with no ice, just a damp cloth. By the time he reached the pier, the bait had gone through a chemical transformation that made it almost magnetic to predatory fish. I'm holding 2 pieces of mullet right now, same fish. Cut this morning from the same fillet. The one on the left has been sitting in my cooler untreated. Standard fresh bait, firm texture, clean smell. The one on the right went into Curtis's preparation last night. 12 hours in a saltwater solution, then air-dried on a rack for 2 hours this morning. You can see the difference immediately. The tissue is slightly opaque, firmer, but not rubbery. And when you bring it close, there's a faint scent that's hard to describe. Not rotten, not spoiled. Something sharper, more penetrating. That smell is the result of what salt does to protein on a cellular level. It breaks down the outer membrane, releases amino acids, and creates a scent cloud in the water that spreads farther and faster than fresh bait ever could. I'm starting with the modern setup. Artificial paddle tail, slow retrieve along the bottom structure about 30 yards out. Winds picking up slightly, which should actually help. Creates current breaks where trout like to hold. First cast goes out clean. I'm letting it sink, counting down to about 8 seconds before I start the retrieve. Steady rhythm. Nothing aggressive. The kind of presentation that works in clear water when fish are actively feeding. I'm working through the first 15 minutes methodically, casting to different angles, varying the retrieve speed, checking depth changes. No strikes yet. Not unusual. Trout can be selective this time of year, especially if the bait schools haven't pushed in tight to shore yet. Switching now to the treated bait. I'm using the same rod, same line, same weight. Only difference is what's on the hook. I'm threading one of those salt-prepared mullet cubes onto a circle hook, making sure it's secure but not overpacked. The goal is to let water flow through the bait, not around it. First cast with the treated method goes out to roughly the same distance. I'm letting it settle on the bottom, no retrieve. Just letting it sit. Curtis used to say the bait does the work if you let it. You're not trying to mimic movement. You're creating a scent trail that builds over time. Within 90 seconds, there's a tap, not a hard strike. Just pressure. I wait. Let the fish take it. Circle hooks work best when you don't set aggressively. Just steady pressure, and the hook finds the corner of the mouth on its own. Line tightens. Rod bends. And I'm bringing in the first speckled trout of the morning. 14 inches. Clean take. Released back after a quick measurement. That's one data point, not a conclusion. I'm running this for another hour to see if the pattern holds. I'm alternating every 3 casts. 3 with the artificial, 3 with the treated bait. Keeping the locations identical. Same casting distance, same structure, same conditions. By the 30-minute mark, the count is sitting at 4 fish on the treated bait, 0 on the modern setup. I'm not exaggerating that. I'm also not claiming it's definitive yet. Wind direction has shifted slightly northeast, which might be pushing bait movement toward the structure where the treated method is sitting. But the difference is notable enough that I'm starting to understand why tournament organizers in the 60s had a problem. The issue wasn't that the method was unethical. It was that it created unequal results in competitions that were supposed to measure skill, not preparation. If one angler spent the night before treating bait using Curtis's method and another showed up with fresh-cut bait, they weren't competing on the same terms anymore. The treated bait had a biochemical advantage that couldn't be matched in real time. So by 1968, most regional tournaments along the Carolina coast had added a rule. No pre-treated or chemically altered bait. Everything had to be prepared on site, day of the event. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a controversy. It was just organizers trying to level the field. But in doing so, they also erased the method from common knowledge. If you couldn't use it in competition, and if competitions were where most people learned, then the technique just faded. I'm at the 1-hour mark now. The count is sitting at 7 fish using the treated bait. 2 using the modern artificial setup. Same water, same conditions, same casting skill. The only variable is what's on the end of the line. I want to be clear about what I'm seeing here. This isn't magic, it's not a trick. It's applied chemistry that happens to align with how predatory fish hunt. And it makes sense when you think about what's actually happening below the surface. When you place untreated bait fish in water, it releases scent. But that scent disperses slowly because the cell walls are still intact. The proteins and oils are locked inside the tissue. A fish has to get relatively close before its lateral line picks up the chemical signature. But when you pre-treat bait with salt, you're doing something very specific. Salt is hygroscopic. It pulls moisture out of organic tissue through a process called osmosis. As water leaves the cell walls weaken. Amino acids that were previously contained inside the tissue start leaching out into the surrounding water. And amino acids are exactly what predatory fish are biologically programmed to detect. Their lateral line system is designed to pick up even trace amounts of these compounds from distances that would surprise most people. Some studies suggest certain species can detect amino acid concentrations as low as 1 part per billion. That's the equivalent of a single drop in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. What Curtis figured out, whether he understood the science or not, was that you could preload bait with those amino acids before it ever hit the water. By the time the bait settles on the bottom, it's already creating a scent plume that spreads with the current. And because the cell structure has been compromised, that plume doesn't fade quickly. It continues to release for as long as the bait stays in the water. Fresh bait, by contrast, takes time to break down naturally. It will eventually release the same compounds, but not at the same concentration or speed. In a competitive environment, where timing matters and fish are moving through feeding windows, that difference becomes the gap between a full stringer and going home empty. I'm not the first person to rediscover this. There are old-timers along the Gulf Coast who still use variations of it. Some soak bait in seawater instead of tap water. Some add a small amount of sugar to speed up the breakdown. Others use rock salt instead of table salt because they believe the mineral content makes a difference. I can't verify all of those claims. What I can verify is that the core principle, salt-based osmotic breakdown, produces measurable results under controlled conditions. And today's test is adding one more data point to that pattern. By the 90-minute mark, I'm sitting at 9 fish on the treated bait, 3 on the artificial. I'm not cherry-picking casts. I'm not adjusting location mid-test. I'm running this as clean as I can with the variables I can control. Air temperature has climbed to 68 degrees. Water clarity is good. Visibility about 4 feet down. There's been one boat pass in the last 30 minutes, but it didn't spook the area. If anything, the wake might have stirred up bottom sediment and triggered a short feeding response. I had one strike immediately after the wake settled. What I keep thinking about is how simple this method actually is. You don't need specialized equipment. You don't need to source rare ingredients. You don't need to spend money on scent additives or commercial attractants. You need salt, water, bait, and time. That's it. The preparation takes less effort than rigging a live bait setup. You mix the solution the night before, drop the bait in, and let chemistry do the rest. The next day, you pull it out, dry it lightly, and you're ready. If you're fishing a full day, you can keep treated bait in a cooler without ice for up to 6 hours before it starts to degrade. After that, the tissue breaks down too much and it won't stay on the hook. But within that window, it performs consistently. Curtis used to say that this method worked best when fish were feeding, but not aggressively, when they were cruising through an area but not actively chasing. That's when scent becomes more important than movement. A fish that's ambushing fast-moving prey doesn't care about scent trails. It's reacting to visual stimuli and vibration. But a fish that's in a lower energy state, conserving calories, moving slowly through structure, that fish is relying more on its chemoreceptors. It's tasting the water, and if it detects a concentrated amino acid signature, it investigates. That's the scenario where treated bait outperforms artificials by a significant margin. Not every scenario, but enough of them that the difference becomes obvious over time. I'm wrapping up the test now. Final count is 11 fish on the treated bait, 3 on the modern setup. Time on the water, just under 2 hours. Same location, same angler, same conditions. The difference isn't subtle. It's the kind of gap that would have raised questions in any competitive setting. And it's exactly why tournaments in the 60s started writing rules to prohibit it. Not because it was unethical, but because it was undeniable. If you appreciate practical fishing methods like this, consider subscribing. It helps the channel grow and keeps these tests coming. And if someone ever showed you something like this, a preparation trick or an old-timer's method that actually worked, I'd genuinely like to hear that story in the comments. Sometimes the simplest approaches are the ones that last.